I've had the privilege of knowing you for a bit. I obviously, as you know, get really geeked out and really excited about things, and I'll go all over the place. As you probably just saw me demonstrate in the last meeting that we've had, right? Where I just walk in and I'm like, whatever that is.
We're going to talk about something else.
Sorry, guys. I know all the work you put in this deck, but let me just hijack Tammy for a second.
Yeah.
But why don't you do this? Introduce yourself so people that don't know you are listening for the first time. Please introduce who you are.
Okay. So Tammy Yang, Tamara out there in the internet, I guess. I work for Compass Datacenters, and I support all of the delivery and construction teams for all of our projects globally. My title is Executive Vice President of Delivery.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty important thing because the company that you work for is a pretty significant group within this industry, right? And I know that you and I, over the course of the last year and a half, maybe, have really exchanged a lot of good conversations. I feel like you've given me ideas for books that I would be reading, specifically about egos or something like that, where, those things have a huge impact on my culture and my team. And I would, I don't get to talk to the folks at your organization enough, but there are lots of things that we have learned from our customers, and you were one of our first customers. So I think I've known you since we started our business. Right? So you've been at Compass for a bit.
Yeah, coming up on 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is to get to the part of what you're doing now as the Executive Vice President of Compass Datacenters, and you run all of their platform delivery globally.
Yeah.
And that is billions of dollars of work, right? So to get to the point in which you are now this powerhouse in construction and delivery in the data center industry, we all started from somewhere, right? And you flew in from Virginia, but where are you from?
Central New York.
Okay, so can we start at the very beginning? Like, give us, if you can, because I do know some of this, because I've asked you some questions in the past. We've hung out before, right?
You ask a lot of questions. Yeah.
Well, I'm genuinely curious.
You are.
Annoyingly curious,
It's
probably.
Good. No, not annoyingly.
But so Tammy, I'm fascinated by people's personal stories, right? And one of the genesis behind this podcast was to help inspire others. And I think that you were sharing some stuff with me in the past. I'm like, why are you keeping this a secret? Like, why don't we have this conversation? And that was probably a year ago when I was like, hey, let's do this. And that's how busy you've been. So you came from Central New York.
Yeah.
And you were the first of so many children, the youngest, the oldest, brothers, sisters?
I have one brother who's 2 years younger than me. I raised in Central New York, small town, Groton, New York. It's near Ithaca, which is where Cornell is. That's kind of a landmark that most people know. Farm country everywhere, very rural. I mean, my town, it's a 4-way stop. It doesn't even have a traffic light in my town to this day, where my dad still lives. Yeah.
So no traffic light. And how far away from New York City is it?
Oh, 6 hours.
So 6 hours from
we don't even associate with New York City.
Of course.
We don't. But, just raised in small town USA, right? My parents were blue collar high school graduates. I think I'm the second or third person in my family of my cousins who went to college eventually and came out with a degree. But, growing up, it's just, I learned a lot from my parents, right? It's just like when I was preteen and then teenager, I worked on my dad is a carpenter. So he would build people's homes. He would remodel a house. He'd build a garage. He would replace windows. That's how he supported us.
So your dad was a builder too?
He was a builder. And so my brother and I would spend our summers. We were really cheap labor, cleanup crew. We would have shingles up to the top of up and down ladders. We would supply them with nails, whatever dad needed, right? We just worked, and in exchange, we got room and board, and
some snacks,
and some snacks, and that sort of, and a lot of experience, right?
It's interesting. Of that time, what do you think that you were learning the most? Was it like the hard work ethic? Was it actually something about the concept of building itself? Was it just spending time with family? I
loved working on my dad's little sites. It was just great because, when we were super little, Dad always was out the door in the mornings before we got up for school. And then he'd come home at night and he'd be dirty, he'd be tired, and you just didn't know what he did all day. And then when we got old enough to go out there and help him in the summers and stuff, we got to see, this is another whole aspect of Dad, right? And I think without realizing it, we absolutely learned about work ethic
Sure.
Because you didn't rest. You took break for lunch in the shade somewhere or in the truck, and you got back to it. And my dad's not a yeller, but he's one of those. He was in the Seabees in Vietnam.
He was a construction battalion.
Yeah.
So he's Navy as well. So
yeah,
your
he
family,
was. Mm-hmm.
How many?
We have a lot of veterans in my family in all the branches, except Marines. We don't have any Marines in my family, but we have Air Force,
It's not
Army.
a bad thing.
We have them all except for the Marines. We even have Coast Guard. Yeah, so going into the when I finally decided to go into the military right out of high school, it was not an unnatural decision.
Was it a progressive one? Were you thinking of that throughout high school, or was it like my senior year? I'm like, hey.
No, I wasn't. But going back to the other piece, it's like, I learned what I think looking back now, reflecting back now, I think watching how my dad interacted with his customers, with the people he was building for, my dad was just super humble, and he was honest to a fault. He was honest and he was transparent, and he just had this way about him. Like, people just trust everybody. Everybody in town knew Marv Chase. That's my dad's name, Marv. Everybody knew, and I never had a name. I was always Marv Chase's daughter.
Nice.
Even after I came back from, the academy or doing all of these other things. Oh, you're Marv Chase's daughter. Yes, I am. And that was okay. I was totally good with being known.
Yeah. He was a respected person.
100%. Just a quiet guy. Yeah.
So, what was that construction company all about? Is he still doing it?
He's retired.
Okay.
He's retired. No. So he wasn't. And he never actually had more than 4 or 5 people ever working for him. Small. Yeah.
Did he inspire you to get into building? Or was it your knowledge and your aptitude and your technical capabilities that got you into it?
I didn't consider it until I was getting out of the Navy.
Okay.
To be honest. So
lots of pieces there. So so when you're in high school, it sounds like in the summer times you worked for your pop.
And I was a waitress in our one diner in the town.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah, I worked Friday nights and Saturday, Sunday mornings. So that's where I learned how to wake up early, because I had to open at 5:30 in the mornings on Saturdays and Sundays. Yeah.
Tough racket for a kid, 5:30 in the morning. I don't know if your father's a better parent than me. I don't know if I could get my kids up that early to go work at diners. I'm just not that good.
That's when at 15, I started drinking coffee.
I had a girl. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing. I can drink a pot myself each morning. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So you're kind of probably immune to caffeine by now.
I might be, yeah.
But you, so when you were in high school, were you an athlete?
I did volleyball and I did track. But it's one of those things, it's like, my parents worked, of course. So if I was going to do anything extracurricular, I had to find my own ride. I kind of had to, which is one of the reasons why I got.
You get really creative that way.
Yeah, you do. And we lived out in the country, right? So I had to hitch a ride, or I was walking, or I was doing whatever. But, it's one of the reasons why I started working so early. I mean, Dad did, I make a joke that it was just room and board, but my dad did pay us, an allowance. Sure. And of course, waitressing helped a lot, because I was also in the high school band, and I wanted my own instrument, not the hand-me-downs from my older cousins that were out of tune, Sure. And I wanted to buy my own class ring, because Mom and Dad couldn't afford a class ring for me, my senior year,
Sure.
And it's stuff like that, that's why I worked, because I wanted to be, there was just this desire in me to be self-sufficient and to take some of the burden off my parents.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
That's really nice. I mean, look, that's something that it seems like that's intuitive to maybe a generation, right? So we wake up and we kind of just think about it like this. I have conversations with my own kids, and I know the ages of yours. They can't relate to us. I was doing summer jobs with my family. I was working under the table, getting paid cash, washing dishes at restaurants, or doing things. I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have internet. The way in which we communicated to each other was different, and the job opportunities were way different, right? So I think a lot of people just didn't care either. Like, I don't care, work harder. Or, I think that a lot of people saw it as the incubator model for youth, where they were just pushing us and driving us. And I found a lot of pride in being able to buy my own stuff and not having to go to my parents and ask for stuff.
Same here.
My dad was great. My dad, I'm pretty lucky. My whole lineage is military too. My dad, to this day, remains one of my greatest heroes, right? Because I could be a kid and ask him and be like, "Hey, man, can I borrow? Can I get $20 for what can I do to earn $20 so I could go do something?" And he's like, "I'll make you a deal." and he'd go leave and come back with like a wagon full with like a push mower that, you literally have to push it to get the blades to spin, a weed edger that you put, a broom that you push. And he's like, listen, I did you a favor. I give you all this. You only owe me $100 by the end of the summer, but this is all yours. And now you can go do some landscaping and you can make as much money as you want.
That's really awesome.
It was the right way to teach a person like me versus giving me $20. Like teaching me how to go make my own money was the most important lesson my dad taught me.
It's amazing.
Sounds like he taught you something like that too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So when you were in high school, what stage did you think, hey, I mean, you're going to school. I mean, you grew up, it sounds like, near to a town of one of the best Ivy League schools in the world. So obviously education is probably very prevalent up there in New York where you're at, right? So were you thinking about going to college in high school, or was it not something you're interested in?
I was, but Cornell was 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away. But I grew up in a farming town of less than 1,000 people with no stoplights. Just, I keep saying that.
Sounds
it's just
peaceful.
Like, I had as many churches as it did bars,
Oh, really?
kind of thing, and I wasn't raised, not because my parents were bad or, limiting or oppressive. They grew up as, high school graduates. My dad did a couple of tours in Nam in the Seabees. They were not raised to believe that they were going to go be an executive or a CEO or a doctor or the president or whatever. And they raised us in the way that they knew how to raise us, which is like, you're going to graduate high school. Maybe you go to a vocational school, go to a trade school. Maybe you go start down at the local Agway as a cashier and you can work up to manager.
Yeah.
This is how this was the messaging, right?
Okay.
And for me, it was even a little bit different than my brother. It's like, well, go to a trade school. Maybe you can become a bookkeeper or an accountant or, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things because that's in that area, those were prevalent jobs and that's what my parents knew. And so I did apply to colleges. I got great grades, but my high school class, my graduating class, we had 85 people, but only 78 of us graduated, right? And
wow.
And I was in the top 5 or 7. I was up there, and I had great grades, and I applied to a few colleges, and I got accepted. It was great. But I overheard I remember it distinctly. I'll never forget it. And it was senior year. It was after the holidays, so we were in the spring, and I hadn't sent any acceptance letters back yet. And I remember hearing my mom and dad talking in the living room, and they were talking about taking out a second mortgage on the house to help me with college. And I'm like, what are we doing here? I don't know what I want to do yet. I don't know what I want to study. And I had watched my parents go through bankruptcy when I was in middle school. I had gone to the local church with my dad, Vietnam vet, self-employed carpenter. During the recession, I walked with him to the church to get milk, cheese, bread for free. And I saw what that did to him.
Sure.
And it was tough for like a year, and I'm like, and so that was still fresh in my mind. That was only 4 or 5 years previous, right? And I'm like, why are they talking about this? I don't need that. So, and I got thinking about it, and, I had an aunt in the Army, I had a cousin in the Air Force, lots of Navy, lots of Army in the family with the older, my uncles and my aunts and everybody. And I was like, why don't I just join the Navy? Why don't I just go figure it out? Let's just go join the Navy.
How did you know the Navy was the right branch versus?
Because that's what Dad did.
Okay.
That was it. There was nothing scientific, or there weren't even any deep thoughts about that.
Yeah.
And, I remember telling my parents, it's like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to go to college right now. And they looked at me, and they don't know, they never knew to this day. And I hope Dad doesn't listen to this podcast. They don't know that I overheard them talking about it, or that's why I just pivoted, right?
Sure.
But when I said, I just think I'm going to join the Navy. What do you guys think about that? And Dad was like, no, you don't want to do that. It's too rough. It's too, it's just your parents do the best with what they have.
That's their job, is to want to protect you,
and and all of that. And I was like, well, Aunt Brenda did it. She was in the Army, and my cousin Sarah, she's in the Air Force right now, and they couldn't really say much about that, right? And so my dad took me down to the recruiting station, and this was like in the spring, so I hadn't graduated yet, and talked to the recruiter, and they looked at my grades and asked me some questions, and basically I signed up, that delayed entry program, I signed up. And so I went into boot camp like 2 weeks after I graduated high school. And, I signed up, to right out of boot camp, you can get promoted to E2 or E3 or whatever
Sure.
it was. And, but I was in this electronics technician program.
Sure.
And that's what I signed up for.
Me too.
And it was
Same
awesome.
thing. Same rate. Yep.
And it was awesome. It was good.
So how did you know that was the right rate? Was it because like when I went and you obviously took the ASVAB, and there's a bunch of other tests you could take depending on how well you do there.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was like any other kid that age where I was like, well, which job gives me the access to making, NCO faster or something like that? So like, were you trying to edge out? Like when I was in E4, I had my NEATS modules done to E9. I'm just that guy, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have, but I was like, if I'm on deployment, why would not?
What else
right?
are you going to do on deployment, right?
100%, right?
Yeah.
So like I was always trying to figure out what the long play was. Were you thinking about the long play when you were talking?
I don't think I was. No, I don't think I was. And I should back up. I was actually thinking about ROTC at the academy in high school. But
like the Naval Academy?
Yeah, I was. And we had somebody, maybe it's like what are they called? I can't remember what they are. The folks who will come, the blue and gold officers.
Okay.
They always have them in all these different areas. And one of them came to our house one time and talked to me, interviewed me, and they basically were just like, your school is way too small. You haven't taken near as many classes as, kids in other parts of the country where they're
advanced AP, everything.
All of that. And so it just wasn't even an option for me at that stage, right? But so I wasn't thinking long-term about anything other than I just wanted to be independent. I wanted to get out and start my life. And
Nice.
I wanted to just get going with things. And I didn't want my parents to have a bunch of debt. I didn't want to have a bunch of college debt. I think if I'm remembering back that far correctly, that's what was top of mind for me at the time was I'm just going to get going and I'm just going to start figuring things out and see what I like and see what I want to do with things. And so electronics technician after the ASVAB and all of that, the recruiter, it was one of the options. The recruiter said, this is what's available to you if you'd like to
nice.
Explore them, right? And I was like,
how long is that school?
Yeah. How long is that school? Is it hard? And he was like, it's really hard. And I was like, I want it.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And so it was great. So
that's amazing. I really want to double tap backwards, and I want people that are listening to listen to what you said like a minute ago, because I always try to tell people that like most people join a branch of service, and any branch of service is a big commitment. That's a big move. Less than 1/2 of the U.S. population ever joins the military. So like, it's not a lot of people that do it. It's a big fraternity. But now even committing to be in the military, that's one commitment. That's massive. But now you picked one branch over the others, right? Which the Navy's completely different than the Marine Corps, which is completely different than the Army or the Air Force or the Coast Guard or Space Force. So there's it's almost like a complete, I try to explain to people that what you did was the equivalency of graduating high school and going, I'm going to go into the automotive industry. I'm going to go into the energy vertical. I'm going to go into manufacturing. I mean, that's how broad of a difference the branches are.
For sure.
They're so different. They share a lot of commonalities, but they're so different. And it's so amazing to me for people to understand that the thing that separates the civilian from the active duty military is less than 8 to 12 weeks, right? It's the stress test, the pressure testing, the stress inoculation, in which for those basic training weeks, however long you were there for, we all are baptized to the same gospel, so to speak, and that's pressure testing, right? And that's the commonality amongst the branches, which is why I think that people talk about veterans with a broad stroke. But the reality is there's a lot of different types of services with a lot of different types of veterans.
Yeah.
So leading up to yours, I think it's bold. And I think that that's what I wanted to hear from you, and I wanted others to pay attention to. And why I'm circling back is you didn't have it all figured out. I didn't have
anything figured out.
You just knew I'm moving forward that way. And I want to be on my own, and I want to go figure it out. And if you're going to go, I don't know about you, but we were talking about this on the drive here. I'm like, I wish that college wasn't the only plan A.
Oh, same.
It shouldn't be.
No.
It used to be. I was born and raised, and we're probably close to the same age, but it was like, if you go to school and you get good grades, you will go to a good college. And if you go to a good college and get good grades, you're going to get a good job. And if you get a good job, you're going to make good money. And if you do that, then you're going to be happy. And the reality is that's not at all how it works.
Not anymore.
And I do think that there are things that colleges are still great for, but there are certain career fields that just don't need it. What you need is immersion. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do.
And I wish that the military became more of a plan A, because I think that it teaches personality and character development skills.
Yes.
It also teaches you advanced stuff. I mean, I don't know, you probably went to a lot of school. I know I went to a lot of school. And that stuff's worth a lot of money too, right? But the stuff that you learned from the chiefs or the senior NCOs that were really the ones that are teaching you, those things transcend far beyond the classroom, beyond the tests. Do you agree?
And you just learn so much about yourself and what you can put yourself into, and you're going to be okay. And you learn how to figure things out, and you learn how to get along with people. Like, look, I grew up in small town USA. There were no diverse people in my town. We were all white, and more than half of us were farmers, right? I went to boot camp, and my bunkmate, I took the top bunk, she took the bottom bunk. My bunkmate was an African-American woman from Louisiana, and she had 3 children that she left with her elderly mother because she was in an abusive environment, and she needed to get out, and she needed to start a career, and she needed to make money. I had never been exposed. I didn't know that kind of a situation existed. That's how ignorant and isolated I was in small town USA. And, we became fast friends. She became the master at arms of our boot camp company. I became the yeoman. And so we were and it was just amazing. It was just amazing. But we had, 10, 12 years difference in age between us.
And a world of difference
in experiences, and why we were there, and what we were hoping to achieve, and what we were going for. And it's just all of a sudden the world just started opening up to me, and the humanity of, we're all in this together. We're a lot more alike than we are different. And I just started soaking it up, and I just wanted the next adventure and the next opportunity and the more and more and more. Because I just left this small town, and there's nothing wrong with it. I love going back.
Sure.
It's restorative for me to go back and spend time with Dad, and, on that small little gravel lane that they'll never pave, but that's where he still lives.
That's awesome.
But, yeah. But, it's, I think the military it's essential. I think it's essential to not just individuals, but the individuals that make up a country, right? And it's our fabric. And I think it helps us keep that intact, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't.
It absolutely does. I think a lot of people could understand it. I think, look, you picked this rate.
Yep.
And you went to school. Now, walk me back from that. So you're in school, and for those that don't know, I classed up with 55 people. I think 35 of us graduated, right? Yeah. And they rank you 1 through 35, based on your grades. Mm-hmm. First person ranked highest gets first rights to billets, right? So you had first pick. And for what I was doing, right, there was only a couple places where fast attacks were sitting. So, and I had a brother that was at West Point at the time. So I wanted to be up in New England, right? I wanted to be in New England, Connecticut. Where, when you were where did you go to your school at? Florida?
Great Lakes. We started in Orlando, but then we were up in Great Lakes for schooling.
How long was that?
It was 9 months.
So where'd you go to basic at? Great Lakes?
Orlando.
They had basic in Orlando back then.
And that was the only place they had basic for women.
Really? Okay. And then they moved. Okay.
It was back in the dark ages, Kirk. It was a long time ago.
Oh, stop. So I'm right there with you. But you went, you have a very exciting story, and I'm slow rolling until we get to that part. But I'm trying to think of, so you went to basic in Orlando, and then you went to A school in Great Lakes.
And then I went to
to basic in Great Lakes, and then I moved to Orlando after.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then I went to C school in Norfolk.
Okay.
Because I went the SATCOM.
Okay.
The SATCOM route.
Okay. So that's probably pretty cool, right? So you're probably learning, were you getting involved in GPS and all kinds of stuff like that too?
All of that, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you end up, at what point were you figuring out, hey, I have to do well in this class if I want to pick where I want to be? And did you have a dream sheet of where you wanted to go?
It was limited, right? Because certainly nuke ET was out of the equation. They weren't letting women do nukes. And at that time, most female ETs were not being assigned ship billets because the ships weren't outfitted for women yet. So there was the dream sheet that was going to be available to my class. And then there was the dream sheet that was actually available to the women in the class.
No kidding.
There was fewer than, there was only a handful of us. I don't remember the numbers, but there was only a few of us.
Okay. Do you keep up with any of those ladies you went to listen with? Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I don't keep up with any of the people I went to all my schools with. But when you were there, how did they categorize which, like, well, let me ask you this. Did you want to go to like Pearl Harbor? Were you like, hey man, I'm in New York. I want to go to San Diego, or I want to be stationed in Hawaii?
I did. I wanted to go to a lot of cool places. I ended up at the Pentagon, which was just up the road. And there was a lot of resentment that was kicked back at me too, right? There were a lot of guys in my class that did not want to be on a ship. They wanted to be shoreside.
Oh, and you got shore duty.
And it was one of those, yeah, you're just taking all of our billets. You're taking all the good ones. And I'm like, not by choice, because I actually wanted to be out on that ship, or I wanted to be in that duty station overseas. And they just, it's just, that's where the Navy was at that time. So
it's come a long way since then.
It has, yeah. I mean, there's pretty much
submarines though.
Yeah. I mean, everything's open now, which is great, is great. I'm not complaining. I'm not bitter about it. It just, I absolutely was resented for things way outside my control, and I was like, "Yeah,
stop." But if you could have, where would you have been? Where would you have been stationed, and what would you have done if the ideal nirvana was where you had to pick whatever?
Oh my gosh, I would have gone to Seattle.
Really?
I love the Pac Northwest.
Okay.
I love the Pac Northwest. I'll never get my husband to move there, so we won't. But
I do like it to visit. I don't know if I'd want to be stationed there, like Woodby Island or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I definitely think I would have picked that over Hawaii. Like, I got buddies that are stationed more than 20, 30 years. You know, they spent 20, 25 years of their career in Hawaii. And I'm like, I don't think I could just stay on
Hear
one
about
rock.
Island fever.
Yeah. That'd be tough for me, right? But I do like the Pacific Northwest. But you were stationed at the Pentagon for a bit, right? And
during Desert Storm.
Okay, and then was that a pretty cool job, by the way?
Yeah, so our SATCOM division, we supported the Joint Chiefs staff. We kept all of their SATCOM gear up during Desert Storm, and at that time, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs staff was General Colin Powell.
So did you get to meet him?
Yeah. We met him every time we had a trouble call. And what was so impressive about him, one of my favorite leaders of all time, he knew all of us by name. You know, the weight of the world on his shoulders during Desert Storm.
Yeah.
But, we would come in on a trouble call at 2 a.m. because one of the satellites up on the roof was down. And we showed up in our dungarees and our tool bags and everything else, or we were fixing a red phone inside the war room right there at the Pentagon. He'd be like, "Good morning, Petty Officer Chase. How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good, sir." And he was like, "Just remember, you don't look at the walls on the right. You don't look at the walls on the left. There's the red phone. Go fix that." But they would draw the curtains and everything.
Yeah.
But he knew us, right? But it was a cool gig. The Pentagon was a cool gig.
That is pretty cool. And then from there, I think that you had a mentor, right?
I had a division officer, Ensign Alton.
Okay.
And she was a recent Academy grad. Yeah.
Okay. So talk to us about that.
She, she just, I guess she noticed me, right? I mean, I just worked hard. I kept
Were you a petty officer by then? Or?
Yeah, I got E4 out of C school. So I was a third class petty officer showing up at the Pentagon. I made second class while I was there.
Okay.
But she noticed me. I was put up for Sailor of the Quarter my first year there, made Sailor of the Quarter. I immediately went into the queue for Sailor of the Year for our department, and I was awarded Sailor of the Year, and then I went up for the entire Navy detachment for the Pentagon that served the Pentagon, and I made Sailor of the Year for OpNav Telecom Center.
Nice.
So I made Sailor of the Year at 2 levels, and it was a few weeks later. She was like, "You ought to consider the Academy," and I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And I just went back to work, and I was just fixing the gear, and I was working on, boards and stuff like that. I didn't really give it much thought. I just thought she was being complimentary because she did say, "Congrats.
Yeah.
You should consider the Academy." It was kind of that conversation. I was like, "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." I went back.
Was she a Mustang too?
She was not. No.
Okay.
No.
So for those that don't listen or don't understand what a Mustang is, it's prior enlisted that becomes an officer. Mm-hmm. My father was a Mustang. I always feel like that's one of the advantages I have is, like, my dad turned 18 in Vietnam, loading bombs on F4s.
Yeah.
And then he came out of the military 24 years later, with a bachelor's from Boise State, a master's from OU, at thousands of hours, in the cockpit. But he was an officer when he retired, lieutenant colonel. But if you spend your time in the military as a Mustang, you get to understand the empathy from the enlisted and the officer side, And
you understand what you're asking people to go do because you've been there.
And there's a big difference between the officer and the enlisted. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I was raised by an officer who was enlisted, and then I enlisted myself, right? So I feel like one of the reasons why I had an easier acclimation to a lot of people, and I never was very nervous around the officers, is because half my family was officers too, right? So we didn't, in my family, look down on officers or enlisted. There was a need for both, and we could admire and respect both. But learning how to understand from both sides of the coin was something that my dad was able to teach me. And you had that advantage because you were enlisted, you were you're E5, mid-level to senior NCO. And you have someone that came from the academy that just said, hey, look, man, you look like you have something that is unique. And they said something to you and you kind of brushed it off and went back to work. But like, how did it develop into something?
She came back to me a couple weeks later and she goes, did you give that any thought? Are you interested in being an officer? And I just kind of paused and she's like, come into my office, let's talk. And so we just had a conversation. And she goes, are you interested? She goes, we can, she goes, we can see if we can make this happen. We can get you to apply. I was like, yes, ma'am, I would love to go. Right.
Were you thinking of it before she mentioned it?
The academy, no. But when I was in ETC school in Norfolk, just on a whim, I applied. And I had a roommate at the time in C school. And she was like, you ought to just apply. Because Boston University, for some reason at that time, was super interesting to me. And they had an ROTC program. So I applied. And I didn't tell my parents that I had applied. And they accepted me.
Boston University
ROTC, right?
Which branch? Navy ROTC?
I was thinking Navy. I was going to stay Navy. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I called my parents and I told them what I had done and I told them that I'd been accepted. And they were just over the moon. And I went to bed that night fully intending to fill out the acceptance paperwork and mail it. Woke up the next morning and I was like, this isn't right. I'm not doing it. And my roommate, she was just stunned. She was like, what happened? I was like, I have no idea, but this is not, it's not right.
Path.
Yeah, I guess not. To this day, I don't know why I woke up the next morning and just said, this isn't it. And so I declined it and I put it in the mail.
Wow.
And I called my parents and they were like, they just couldn't believe it.
They shun you as they should have?
No. But they couldn't explain it. They couldn't understand it.
Did they support you?
Yeah, they did. They did. It was always that hesitant kind of support. Like I was entering into worlds that they didn't. I was reaching for worlds that they couldn't help me with. They could tell that I was like outside of their reach now, and you're
punching outside your weight class.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt, punching outside my weight class. In fact, my dad one time he goes, I don't know. He was like, I don't know that I raised you to be an officer. And it's not that he looked down on officers, but he was enlisted. He was an NCO in NOM,
Sure.
And we didn't have any officers in our family. Everybody in my family was NCO, right? And he didn't mean it in a bad way, but again, he was raising me with what he knew, right?
Yeah.
With the best of intentions.
His intent is all that matters sometimes, if he's trying to do his best by you.
But for some reason, I just kept going. But anyways, I did decline it that year. But it was that following year when I was at the Pentagon, 1.5 2 years, I'd made SEAL of the Year, and Ensign Alton, she approached me. And when I said, yeah, I said, I'd love to just give it
how do I start?
Yeah, how do I start? And she was like, give me a couple of days. And so at that time, because we worked for OpNav TCC, we reported into the Director of Space and Warfare. And his name was Vice Admiral Tuttle. And just a great guy, jovial, just always a great leader, always said hi to us when he walked to our workspaces and everything. And she set up a meeting with him. And I went in, and it was just like out of the movies. He had this big office in the Pentagon with the blue carpeting and the wood furnishings and the red drapes and everything. He goes, so, he says, I hear you want to be an officer in the Navy. And I kind of look at her and she's like, and I was like, yes, sir, I do. And I was sweating bullets, and I was so nervous to be.
How old do you think you were at this time?
I would have been
early 20s.
I would have been. I turned 21 plebe summer at the academy.
Okay, so you're 20.
I'm 20. It was the spring. It was that spring. It was so. This would have been like April, May timeframe of 90.
Real quick then. Normally
91.
they've already straddled up their class for the next
But the academies, they reserve about 152 for fleet.
Didn't know.
Those spots were rarely ever completely filled.
I never knew that.
But the academies always reserve 150, 200 spots for fleet.
Good.
Yeah. And so when I said, yes, sir, and he says, okay. He says, and we had a conversation. He asked me about myself, talked about what I'd been doing. He was looking through my performance records. He had certainly been briefed. He had my file in front of him. He was like, he says, all right, let's make a phone call. And so he made a phone call out to the superintendent of the Naval Academy, who's Rear Admiral Lynch, who was his roommate at the academy back in the day. He was like, Tom. And he was like, I got a second class petty officer here. And he says, I think she needs to be an officer. You got any room in the incoming class? And they talked for a bit. And he hung up and he looked at me. And he goes, all right, next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to drive out to the academy both days. On day one, you're going to meet this woman. Her name's like Lynn Anderson or something. She's going to she's going to help you fill out all the paperwork, all the applications. Second day, you're going to go back out there on Wednesday. He says, you're going to take the PRT, physical readiness test. He says, and then you're going to go get a full physical. And he says, that's what you're going to do. He says, incoming class starts on July 6th. He says, so you're probably going to have to get your things in order. He says, you're going to have to wrap things up here. And he looked at Ensign Alton, and he was like, Ensign Alton? He was like, I need you to get in touch with the Secretary of the Navy. He's got to have to write her nomination letter. And that's what happened.
Because you need a nomination, congressional, senatorial, or something like that to get in.
So I got it from the SecNav.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I don't like to tell that story because...
It's a flex.
Pardon?
It's a flex. No, it's awesome. It's a cool story.
But so many people across the country, what is it, like 10,000, 20,000 applicants every year, and only like 1,500 people are accepted. And it's just like... And
5 of them, less than that, get a SecNav nomination, probably one of them.
Yeah. And it's just like, I wasn't even trying, I guess. I didn't see that as my future. I didn't see that as a possibility for me. But, it was just luck and good fortune that I'm super grateful for. I didn't realize what an inflection point that was in my life, what a turning point, that somebody saw something in me, and they didn't come to me once and ask about it. They followed up and they came back again, and they're like, no, you've got something. Sure. You should consider being an officer. I don't know that I would have ever made it to the academy or considered ROTC again. I was just so immersed in the day-to-day, and it was great, and I was enjoying it, but I mean,
let me ask you this.
It was just... So
you enlisted 2 weeks after high school. So you're in 20 now. So you've been in the Navy for 2.5 years, going on 3. You're E45.
Mm-hmm.
And at any point, were you thinking about re-enlisting?
I was.
Okay. So were you thinking about making a career out of this?
I was because I was starting to hear that they were opening up some ships for women. They were getting retrofitted, like the oilers, the supply ships. And I just wanted to be out at sea. I didn't want to be taking the shore billets. It stuck with me, right? I was like, well, why can't I go, right?
Sure.
And so I kept my ear to the ground, and I heard that, female electronics techs were getting sent to the fleet. There weren't a lot of them, but there were some, and I was willing to stay in it until I could get out there.
Nice.
And, Ensign Alton knew that. And she was like, that female officers are already going out to the fleet because they're in staterooms.
Yeah.
And it's easy to just designate a couple of staterooms to women. She goes, they're already going. And for me, I was like, that made me want it even more, because I wanted to be on a destroyer. That's just what I wanted.
A destroyer?
I just wanted to be on a destroyer.
Wow. Why a destroyer?
I wanted to go fast, shoot missiles.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about how fast a destroyer goes?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really.
I'm sure people could buy a book of Jane's and they could figure it out if they look it up.
You absolutely could. I mean, there's something stated in Jane's, but we don't go as fast as the carriers because they always used to lose us in ops.
I don't think anything does. Nothing. People don't realize how fast carriers are.
That's right.
They have multiple propellers and multiple reactors.
They lost us every time.
They smoke us. But I'll tell you, it's interesting how I was the opposite. I was like, man, I want to be in the Navy, but the last thing I want to do is be on the surface of the ocean. I was like, I get seasick real easy, so I have to be down below it, or I have to do something that doesn't require me to be at sea as often, because I'm not the only guy in the Navy that was getting seasick all the time too. You know what I'm saying? I mean, no one, did you know that you would be immune to that?
I had no idea.
You didn't care.
There were fewer deep thoughts than I would like to admit to. I just kept going.
But it sounds like that's the trick. That's the secret sauce. It's not knowing the answer. It's just not being afraid.
Just try it.
Just try something that's
But a 3-year commitment, a 4-year commitment, when you talk to people, like I would talk to my kids about, just enlist, just go for 3 years, 4 years. It seems like such a long time for them at that stage in their lives. And in relative terms, it is, right? But it's in the long haul, it's not.
I think it's the greatest thing you could be doing as a junior sailor. Like I was, I turned 21 at sea actually, right? So I loved it, but I could tell you this, there's no chance my kids were having more fun in college. I have one at the University of South Carolina, one at the Citadel.
Yeah.
They have a great time. There's no chance they're having as much fun as you do when you're with your unit or with your
That's
military
right.
people.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm talking about? Because that's a tighter fraternity,
Yeah.
right? But they still have fun, and I get it. But I loved being a junior sailor, to be honest, because the expectations were very low.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could go have as much fun as you want and be in the fleet, right? And I mean, you were part of the regular fleet, so that's a fun part. So, so around the spring, this ensign, do you keep in touch with this ensign?
No, we did lose touch.
Okay.
We lost touch. She separated from the Navy while I was at the academy. She had done her 5 years, and then I lost touch with her.
Well, I'm sure that's something, maybe this podcast or something.
Maybe.
But, you were just kind of trucking along, happy with what you were doing, willing to re-enlist because you liked it. You wanted to get to the fleet.
Yeah.
And some ensign came up and said, "Hey, we see something in you." I mean, you obviously put yourself on the map because I've gone through very similar things. I didn't go to the level of junior sailor or the whatever as you did, but I've won some quarterly stuff and year stuff, and that's cool. They treat you nice, and you get like normally you get out of jail a few times free with that type of stuff, But there's so many different commissioning programs that we're in when we were enlisted. Like there was Boost, Broad and Opportunity Officer Scholastic Training, Seaman to Admiral, blue to whatever, or blue to gold. Is that the
possibly? There's NABs to the
Boondocks to
yeah. There's all
khaki.
kinds.
But there's so many different features.
OCS.
They really want to encourage you to move up, and I think that's the one thing that I miss and love the most about the military is you're constantly in a cockpit, left seat, right seat training scenario. You're always, as soon as you get somewhere, you're like, teach the person below you your job while you have to learn the job of the person above you. You're constantly in this iteration. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you're there, this is the part where I was like, Tammy, can you come share this story? It was because you had a very unorthodox way to get to the Naval Academy, and it's one of the most prestigious universities. It's just as hard to get into than any other Ivy League school, and it's in many cases. I mean, like when people watch the Army-Navy football game, the story is it's the only game that you'll watch on TV that's played between everybody that's playing is willing to die for everybody that's watching, and that's a special thing the Air Force has at VMI and Citadel. There's great rivalries for all those things, but that's a special university, right? So you have admirals, vice admirals picking up phone calls to their friends because it's a small community, right? So they just liked you enough and they made these calls and they're like, okay, go check these boxes. And then in June 6th, you pack it in just like the rest of them, right?
Yeah.
What's it like showing up to the Naval Academy, having spent, you're a fleet E5.
Yeah. And I showed up in uniform with my own sea bag. And everybody else was showing up in their
civilians.
In their civvies, right? And they were 18 and eyes were this big. And I'm just like, where's the formation? Where do I get in line? Because
you knew what to do.
I did. And I showed up with 3 rows of ribbons, right? And so that's what it was like showing up. And I was noticed.
You have all that chest candy.
They started flaming me right away. And I was like, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do this.
Because they had to pressure test you first because you were clearly going to be
They made an example out of me a bunch of times. Yeah. Well, they tried to. But
as they should have. I think that's natural.
I will say though, sorry. On July 18th, which was my birthday when I turned 21, that plebe summer. So we were only 2 weeks into plebe summer.
Eesh.
Yeah. They all popped a beer in my name while we were in push-up position.
That's very thoughtful of them. I hope you thank them for celebrating your birthday for you.
Oh, yeah. They did celebrate for me. Yeah.
So, plebe summer, man, people don't realize you probably show up like a month before the other students and you just start getting through it first before.
Yeah, we show up 2 months, right? Because we're there for 8 weeks before
basic.
Because before the rest of the brigade comes back, because they're all off on the summer tours and everything else, right?
You, man, so you basically did basic training twice.
I did. Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing you weren't the yeoman the second time. You were probably more on. Did they assign you some leadership roles?
Not during plebe summer. No.
No, you're all equally worthless.
Yeah, we were all equally worthless and pathetic and everything else they called us. Yeah.
Well, they're trying to weed them out, right?
Yeah.
You want to thin that herd as fast as you can so you're not wasting and investing so much time into people that aren't really bought into the program. It makes sense. So tell me what that transition was like going from enlisted to now you show up and you probably have more experience than a lot of the people that are there tasked to teach you some things.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me about what was the greatest thing you learned as an enlisted person before you transition into the officer learning, because it's a completely different mindset. Right. So what did you take away as an enlisted person that you think gave you an advantage than
Yeah,
others?
it's not completely different. I mean, I think the one thing that being enlisted for 3 years did for me was just that mental toughness, right? It was just eyes in the boat. It did not matter what was going on around me. I just it just they like I said, they tried to make an example out of me early. And there was 3 or 4 of us in my company who were prior enlisted. There was 3 or 4 of us.
Okay.
One guy was subs. Rob, he was subs, and Eric was he was in the fleet. They tried to make an example out of all of us, all 3 of us, 4 of us. And we didn't break, but that was the key, right? It's just move on to the next people. It's not going to be me, right?
It's just a little bit of time.
It is. And so it was fine. So the military piece of it was that was bread and butter for us.
Did you have any struggles at all?
Swimming?
Really?
Swimming. I went to boot camp when I was 18, and it was on my 18th birthday, actually. July 18th is when I just showed up at boot camp, and I showed up not knowing how to swim.
How is that possible?
Just central New York. We just didn't.
You're on the farms. You don't need to
We're on
swim.
farms. Yeah, we're outdoors all the time. But and,
that's a critical test to pass the basic training,
right? And I think that was the difference, because in boot camp, they throw you in. They don't ask you if you can swim in there. Yeah, they were just like, go. You've got to get to that end over there if you're going to make it.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how to do it. I just started moving my arms and legs.
Dog paddling.
Must have been the ugliest thing ever. But I made it. I swallowed a lot of water on the way over to the other end of that pool. But I showed up to the academy not knowing much more than that, because it's not like after boot camp, I took swimming lessons. I didn't need to do it anymore, right?
Sure.
So that was, honestly, I have to tell you, out of all of the things at the academy, the swimming was the hardest piece for me. Isn't that silly?
Yeah.
Because they make you, there's a bunch of different tests. There's like the 40-year swim. You have to swim for 40 minutes in full uniform in a pool with all of your classmates. They have several different types of swimming tests you have to do. You have to jump off the 10-meter board, abandon ship posture, anything that would simulate getting off a sinking ship. There were several tests that you had to do related to that. And of course, the academics were super hard.
Oh, at the Naval Academy? Mm-hmm. Yeah, people don't realize that I think the core curriculum for everybody that goes to an academy is engineering, right? Yeah. So everybody has a core curriculum of engineering. They
have a whole cybersecurity curriculum now too.
Really?
They build a building for it at the academy. Yeah, it's
Which
crazy.
is critical. It's absolutely necessary. It makes sense. What was it like being at the Naval Academy? Did you guys ever beat West Point when you were there? Army Navy game?
No.
What year did you graduate in Annapolis?
95.
All right, I have a brother that graduated West Point 96. So you guys played against each other at school probably a little bit. But yeah, I remember the long droughts where West Point would always win, and then the Navy. Remember, Navy had it for like 12 straight years.
Yeah.
I remember
when we had Keenan Reynolds and those guys. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a time where it went on forever. And it almost got embarrassing to watch that game. I was like, I did, but I usually get sick of hazing the West Point, the Army people during the Army-Navy game.
Yeah.
Because, there's only so much therapy you could put them in with those.
It's so true.
But all of a sudden one year, the Army woke up and they started winning again. It was weird. Yeah. But what was it like being there? Because people don't realize that that's not just a really amazing educational institution. It's almost a piece of history, right? Mm-hmm. That's a pretty impressive place. A lot of presidents have gone to school there, obviously, but a lot of people that have changed the world have gone to a school like that. And not all schools can say that, right? Yeah. So tell me what it was like to go to school there, and what do you think were some of the greatest gains that you were picking up while you were there?
I mean, you're just surrounded by the history, right? The pictures, the plaques, the statues, the monuments, the history. You're just immersed in the history, and you can't go a day and not acknowledge what you're part of.
Yeah.
And the legacy that they're preparing you to continue on, right?
Yeah.
It was just a really they take you to the point of failure. Nobody there doesn't experience failure. Everybody there experiences failure. It's by design. You've got to know where your limits are. You've got to know where you can be pushed further, whether it's on the academic side, the physical side, the military side of it. It's all aspects of your life. Your days start early, they end late. The curriculum is. I mean, my lightest semester was like 13 hours, and that was second semester senior year, first year.
Yeah.
I mean, my average course loads were 17 to 19 hours a semester. It's insane.
my son at the Citadel didn't make the dean's list the first semester, and I gave him a little bit of shit. I'm like, what happened? He goes, I was taking 21 units, and it was my first semester. But I'm like, 21 units, man. But that's people at the academies go trucking with a lot of classes. It's and there's a lot of leadership and a lot of physical fitness. So he's up at.
And that's what I was going to say, because in addition to pretty intensive 4-year programs, and some of them legitimately could be 5-year programs, you have military classes you have to take every semester. Plus, there are physical fitness and swimming classes you have to take every semester.
Sure.
It's a full course load. I mean, and
what did you get to do for your midshipman summers? Anything fun? Like, what was your first midshipman summer like?
Geez, I don't know that I remember them in order, but definitely there were a couple of sea tours. I went out on an oiler one summer, went out on the PCs, the patrol craft one summer. We went up to New York and just went along the coast. Went to Quantico one summer.
How was that?
That was great. Obstacle courses, units, all of that. It was really great. It was an exposure to the life in the Marines.
I was like, were you thinking about going Marine Corps option or something?
I wasn't. No,
but
I
you
wasn't.
just wanted, why not bother try it?
No, everybody does a tour through there. Everybody does Quantico.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
I actually tried. I actually went through the trials to be accepted into Airborne one summer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump out of a plane, because why not?
Why not?
My buddy Dan and I, we went through Airborne trials together, and one of the things they taught you in Airborne is don't help the person next to you. And it's so counterintuitive.
Makes sense, though.
Because if you're jumping out of a plane and your parachute doesn't work, there's nobody there to help you. You've got to figure it out on your own. So it's counterintuitive to not, because the military is all about you help each other, you're a unit. But in this one case, it was like you do not help each other. And at one point, we were in a platoon run, and my buddy, he started falling back. He just had a problem with his knee, or it was banged up knee or something. And I grabbed him by the arm to pull him up even with me, and they saw me do it. And we both got kicked out.
Oof.
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I believe all of that, because they don't mess around, and the attention to detail matters for everything. If they give you
It does. Yeah, it does. I mean, the summers were always jam-packed. I did summer school one summer, just to kind of ease the workload going into the following year. And I just needed to do that. And then you get one section of your summers off where you can go home for like 2 weeks and just take a break, 2 or 3 weeks, take a break.
You do?
Yeah, you do.
I did not know that.
If I
around
remember
the
correctly,
holidays probably or something.
No, well, over the summers, while the plebes are coming in, you've got it's broken up into 3 tranches, and you do two tours of something. And then that third one, you get to go home. And whether it's first block, second block, or third block,
Did you, I like when you were talking about how that's an institution that's not just for education, but it's designing people to understand how to deal with adversity and failure. And you're right. I mean, the military, even if you did damage control training in the military, like a submarine, you'd have a week of firefighting, a week of flooding, and it didn't matter. You were not coming out of that classroom until you failed miserably, because they have to do that, right? And then you get to figure out how do you do in no-win scenarios. And I do think that pressure testing is something that is unique to what the military offers. I think that a lot of people are raised to think failure is bad, and failure means I'm losing, or failure is a negative thing. And the overtone is just in general negative. Where in the military, I never felt like that at all. In fact, I felt failure was part of the process, and therefore to be celebrated. Yeah. And that's why we did so much training, so that you could fail in training, so that you could survive when it mattered most, right? So I felt comfortable with a lot of the training we did. I felt it necessary. I never was like doing drills going, I haven't slept, because we drill all the time all the time, every day, right? So when you're not on station doing an actual operation or an mission, when you're transiting there and transiting back, you're draining and trilling and training and training and training.
You are.
And it's absolutely necessary, right? But I never felt like it. I always felt like that was an advantage of getting that brought into us. But I also felt like the training was welcome, because I was going to eventually fail, and I'd rather it fail when it never mattered. Did you find that too, like at the academy, where they would push you, and then once you arrived at the lesson, which is typically at the bottom of the pile of failure, then they build you back up, and they're like, okay, now what do we get from this? Did you find those scenarios from there? Did you feel like that was something that—
I got this in boot camp when I was enlisted, honestly, because that's where the failures were, where they could build you back up. Where I was struggling was being out of high school for 3 years.
Maturity.
And just not remembering how to study, not remembering how to just have a heavy course load. The academics they were an ass kicker.
What do you study? You study physics, right?
I did, but that's not what I started out with. Because I was an electronics technician in the Navy when I was enlisted, again, not a lot of deep thoughts in my younger years, right? I was like, oh, well, I have to select a major. I'm going to go electrical engineering, right? Because why not? I was an electronics technician. Surely I can be an electrical engineering major, a double E major. And that did not go well. I failed out. Got F's and D's my first semester, sophomore year. And it was so fast paced and so intensive. And again, remember, I came from a small school.
Tough school for engineering.
85 kids in my class, 78 of us graduated. I didn't have that background, right? And I'd been out of school for 3 years. And I was just so far behind. I thought it was just going to be more electronics, maybe with some engineering or some math behind it. Turns out it was all engineering and math, right? Yeah. And it just didn't go well. And it wasn't that department at that time was not one to slow down and build people back up or provide a lot of tutoring or mentoring or support or extra instruction. It was just too fast paced. So I failed fast on that. And I was like, I can't do this. It's not going to work for me. And I did switch. And this is where I think probably the first time that I can remember where I started paying attention to my purpose or where my flow state is. And I switched to physics, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, physics is so hard, but I'll lose myself in science all day long.
Interesting.
And if I think back to high school, I lost myself in that physics class and chemistry and biology.
So you like that stuff more than
earth sciences. Yeah, for sure. And so when I switched to physics, it was hard. I had to lessen my course loads by taking summer school one summer, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't an A student all the way through, but I loved it. I just ate it up.
So overall, you enjoyed your time at the academy?
Yeah.
I mean, as much as you can. It's not designed for you to be.
It's not. Yeah.
You don't go there to get happy. You go there to get better and stronger.
You do.
And to be a better.
You do. And I learned how to dig deep. I learned how to just keep going and to figure things out and to use my resources to ask for help. Yeah, there's
strength in that vulnerability.
There sure is.
You have that's one thing that I use, joking with me. I think the military taught me to be like the critical question attitude that they conditioned us to have was like they would punish us if we weren't asking questions all the time. So it annoys people, but I ask questions all the time because I'm like, it's the only way to really understand is to keep pulling at that thread until there's nothing left of it, right? So by the time that you're going into your senior year, did you kind of have it figured out what you wanted? Like you wanted to be on a destroyer. Mm-hmm. What was available for you to do upon your graduation? And did you have a dream sheet and were you able to get what you wanted?
Well, I wanted to be on destroyers. I wasn't interested in aviation or anything.
Carriers.
Carriers were nukes. So
okay.
But I guess there's women on the carriers. So sure yeah. So, but I still wanted to be on a destroyer, and I still wanted to be in the Pac Northwest, right?
Okay.
But because my grades weren't great, I was down the list in the service selection pool, right? Yeah. I mean, several hundred of my classmates were choosing way before me.
Sure.
And so by the time I got up to service select that night, there were still lots of destroyers left, but all the Pac Northwest ones were gone. So I picked a destroyer out of Norfolk, and it was great. And that's where I was stationed.
Now, your significant other, Navy Academy grad as well?
He is, yeah.
Were you at school together?
We overlapped.
Did you know each other then, though?
No, we did not.
Okay.
He was a year ahead of me.
You didn't meet till you hit the fleet or something like that?
That's right, on our first destroyer.
Did you replace him as a MPO or something like that?
No, well, I did
MPA?
Eventually when he transitioned off. We were in engineering together. I was a damage control assistant, and he was the main propulsion assistant.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Okay.
We didn't really get along at that time. We will never own a business together. We will never work at the same company together. That is not our sweet spot.
Yeah, I could see that. Two type A Navy Academy
kind
grads.
of, yeah. And we have different styles, right? Neither one of them's good or bad. We're very different on how we approach things. So
but that's cool that you have that. You know how to set those boundaries, around yourselves, so that you're not chipping away at each other because. We are kind of conditioned in the military to embrace healthy friction, we don't run away from conflict. We don't hopefully run towards it and pleasure, but like conflict's just a part of the game, right? So we're going to trade pain.
Stress and fatigue. And
it's something that I think is, again, I think that failing and stress are something that the military teaches you to deal with better than your civilian counterparts. So you get to the fleet. Did you get to do any, so you didn't want to be, you wanted to go on the Pacific. We call them Westpacks in the Atlantic Fleet.
Yep.
Westpacks on the West Coast. Is that what Westpacks? Is that what they call them?
No, East.
We do.
I don't know.
Mid runs or med runs. So we do the Mediterranean and the West Coast. So if you were in the Pacific Northwest, you would have done
Isn't that crazy? I don't remember what they're called either. But no, I did deployments through the Atlantic. I mean, we did the Caribbean for training exercises and stuff like that. But all of my deployments were across the Atlantic.
Where at?
Through the Mediterranean, and then generally through the Suez Canal and into the Arabian Gulf.
Okay.
Persian Gulf is what it was called back then.
How long were your deployments for? 6 months, 8 months, longer?
They were 6 to 8.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you were on, destroyers aren't, you have to be fueled how often? Like once a month, every couple of weeks?
Yeah, going every few weeks. Yeah, we were pulling up alongside an oiler.
Yeah.
Underway.
And that's got to be such a dangerous and crazy evolution. People don't realize that. Like that's got to be where a lot of the pressure as a captain comes along, because it doesn't take much for two ships to touch, right?
Oh, for sure. And you can get sucked in because those oilers are so much bigger than a destroyer, right? And there's just this delicate balance, and you have to pull along. You can't be coming in at 5 knots and you have all the time in the world to course correct. You've got to get water moving past the rudders, right? So we're coming in at 20 knots, 15 knots. And you're screaming alongside. And if you get within, 100 yards, it's too close and they're going to suck you right in and you're going to hit. But if you're too far out, they can't shoot the lines across.
Do they bring a pilot on your ship before they do that, or do they let you guys
for refueling?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we do it ourselves.
You do it yourselves. Wow. All right. Well, I never had to deal with that. But what's it like? I mean, what was your first deployment like? Anything fun? You have any cool stories you'd like to talk about?
It was like refueling for sure, and we had an amazing captain, Captain Kennedy. He was so calm. He was like our second father, right, on deployment. All of us junior officers, right, because he taught us how to drive, right, and up on the bridge, and the refueling ops. He would just stay so calm, and he had this posture. He would take in his chair, up on the bridge, and he would just watch. And you knew you were doing okay if he stayed in the chair. But if you kind of hopped down, and he was this big guy, 6'3", but he had big walrus mustache, but just a very warm personality. He'd walk out on the bridge and he'd say, DCA, what's the range and bearing to approach? And I would give it to him, and he'd watch it for a while, and I'd keep getting closer to the oiler. And this is my first time trying it, and he's like, do you think you should come out a little bit? No, sir, we're good. We're lined up.
Are you sure that CPA is right?
He watched it for a little bit and he was like, Nav, I want you to come right 10 degrees.
Yeah.
And
very subtle.
Yeah, very subtle. And then I started doing it and we kept screaming in. And then this is the one thing you just never want to hear. This is the captain, I have the con. And he took over and he pulled us out and he goes, hard right rudder, all ahead flank. And he just whipped us right out of it. And he goes, okay, Nav, you're going to try it again. He was like, this is the captain, DCA's got the con. He's like, bring it around, try it again.
That's how you practice?
But he just stayed so cool and calm and collected. And then afterwards he debriefed me and he drew. He was very much a person who drew. And he was drawing pictures and he's like, this is what I think you saw. Is that right? And I was like, yes, sir. And he goes, all right, next time. He's like, you're going to want to be able to see the mast and this and that. And he was just, yeah. But he didn't freak out. He didn't scream at me. He didn't do any of that stuff. And I think I learned a lot of lessons in leadership.
Yeah.
And coaching and guidance from him. He was my first captain on my very first destroyer as a junior officer out of the academy, And so it was cool stuff like that we did all the time.
How long is a destroyer?
Oh, geez. We're only, oh my God, why are you asking me that? I don't remember.
I'm curious, like a submarine, a fast attack's 360 feet and 4 inches, at least the type I was on, 68. Yeah. So and we had a crew, it could be anywhere between 100 to 120 people, typically averaged around 112, right? So how many people then would be on a crew of a destroyer? Just curious.
Well, yeah, so we started out before the smart ship concept came in. We would have about 300 people on board, right? And we were 9,700 tons.
Okay.
Those 2 data points I remember, yeah. So we were a few hundred feet long.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you go to a destroyer, it's going to be like, are you on that destroyer, which is a Seagull in command for 3 years, and then they rotate you back to shore duty, or you spent your whole time as an officer on sea duty?
Oh, no, I did 2 years there, 2.5 years there, and then I went to another destroyer, and I did another 2.5 years, and then I did a tour at shore duty.
So does it go like you're a division officer, then you go try to get a department head slot, and then the third time you're going for XO or something like that? Or
They're 2 division officer tours
Okay.
that you do back to back. Then you go to shore duty, and that's prepping you for a department head tour, and then you go back out as a department head.
And then after that, then you probably have to do some.
And then you're getting ready for XO and CO.
Got you. And at that time, when you were an officer, when you first became an officer and were commissioned, what did you think? Did you think, hey man, maybe I'll still do this for a living, and I'll do this because now you could be on the destroyers you wanted. You could probably keep doing it long enough to get on the Pacific Northwest side of it.
Yeah.
Like, did you think that you'd maybe stay in?
I started changing my mind. It was a different experience.
Okay.
The Navy was going through a lot of reduction in force at that time. And they were making a lot of decisions, this smart ship concept where everybody was trained cross-functionally to serve lots of different roles. So where you would have maybe bosun's mates or damage controlmen trained to be on certain different types of teams in the event of, a torpedo hit or a fire or an explosion or something, or a chemical warfare attack or something like that. Now we were all wearing multiple hats where we could be in any one of multiple places. And so we were being trained broadly and quickly, but not very deeply. And so what ended up happening, and this went for the officers as well, and what ended up happening was mishaps, ships running aground, accidents at sea, those sorts of things, collisions. And the reaction from the Navy was, I just started seeing a lot of leaders get fired, and because of the attrition, because of the downsizing, because they were, mothballing ships in the fleet and not necessarily bringing out new ones as fast, the opportunities for command at sea, which is what I was aspiring to, they were diminishing.
Yeah, that people don't realize there's 300 warships in the Navy. People don't realize there's not a lot of them, right?
And it used to be that you could get back-to-back command at sea tours, and I think in some cases you can, like you can do an oiler or some sort of combatant, and then get a carrier, right, or something like that. But it used to be you could be a commanding officer of your own ship for a couple of years at least, and then it started going down. By the time I made the decision that, I don't know that I aspire to this anymore, command at sea tours were not guaranteed for everybody who stayed in, and the tour lengths were 12 to 14 months only.
Oh, okay. So it's almost like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
It got to be that point. And, with the exception of Captain Kennedy, my first CO, the commanding officers I had after that, the pressure was tremendous, and it came through, and it's like, I just don't aspire to that anymore. I see what it's doing to you. I don't want that to be done to me. And I didn't see a way to avoid that, because the destroyer squadrons were under immense pressure, and they were applying that pressure to the fleet. And I think they've come out of it. I think they've course corrected. The Navy has over time. I still have friends who are in. And
in your peer group, make it to the...
Yeah, I have admirals.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. They're just now getting, they're getting pinned, but they're there.
Yeah.
They're there. And we're like, seriously? I jumped the wall and did recons with him at the academy. We broke into, this and, all of this. And he's an admiral, really. But
isn't that awesome?
it's really great stuff. Yeah, it's really great stuff.
So at what point, were you, when you graduate from the academy, by the way, they make you do 5-year minimum?
Yeah, it was 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So 5 years into this, and at what point were you into it where you realize, hey, in a year from now or 2 years from now, whenever my end of obligated back to duty is, I'm probably going to transition? Did you have those conversations with your command, and did that change the way they invested in you? Stuff like that. Did you know that you were getting out pretty early?
I started thinking about it in my second tour before I went to shore duty. And, but I didn't really talk to anybody about it because I was just thinking about it, and I was just evaluating it. I was just watching, and I was just paying attention to how the Navy was responding to all of these things. And I was just really kind of sizing it up at that point. But I had so much fun on my deployments. We were up in Kosovo, off of Kosovo, and Milosevic, was doing his thing. And
were you guys tossing tomahawks?
Oh, and we would go down and we would go down to Sicily, Sardinia, and we would reload and come back, right? And we were doing it in joint operations. We always had 2 submarines. They had land-based missile launchers with a range of like 13 miles. And I was a navigator by then on my second ship, and I was a navigator. And so I kept us on this racetrack that was no closer than 14 miles because their land-based missile launchers had a range 13 miles, right? But even then, we always had 2 submarines, and we never knew where they were. But they were always between, underwater, of course, between us and shore to make sure that they didn't launch any of theirs, right, and come out. And that was just an incredible experience, right? Because they actually brought a mattress up to the bridge for me. I slept on the bridge for like 4 months because I was on call.
Yeah,
and
that's the nav. You have especially when you're operating that close.
Yeah, and so but the captain and the XO, they would spot me. They'd be like, "Now it's time for you to go take a shower." No, thank you.
But that was your second command. That was
my second command. Yeah, but I was all in the Persian Gulf on my first command with Captain Kennedy. I keep referring to him because I think he's just one of my very first leader mentors, where I just gained so much from him. But there was a point where in the Persian Gulf at that time, we had the embargoes, at that time, and we were enforcing them. And that's why we spent like 5 or 6 months in there. And we would have to pull ships over who we thought might be violating the embargoes. And we would send, visit board search and seizure teams over, and we'd board their ships and do the inspections, and you'd have to be fully armed. And, on the way over, across the Atlantic, the captain asked for volunteers, and he needed a certain number of officers. We were gonna man 2 10-person teams, and we needed 2 officers on each team. And I threw my name in the ring. I was like, I want to do that. And Captain Kennedy, he pulled me aside, and he was like, Nav, I can't consider you for this. And I was like, why not? Or I wasn't Nav, I was GCA at the time, and I was like, sir, why not? And he was like, you're going to be going visit. I'd be putting you on ships that had no women, and in those cultures, women are killed for showing their faces and all of this stuff. And I was like, sir, I don't care. I'm going to have a gun. I was saying stuff like that to him. He's like, I can't do it now. And I talked to him about it some more, and I argued with him. I was up on the bridge with him, and we were in port, and it was just us. And I just remember just getting so close to just breaking down because it was something outside of my control. And I was like, sir, I can shoot better than my counterparts. I've done this training. I said, I'm prepared to do this.
Yeah, they're limiting you that.
And he was doing it because he thought he was
fraternal,
fraternal, right? And paternal, whatever it is, And he came back to me a few days later, and he was like, I was wrong. He was like, I'm gonna put you on a team.
Attaboy.
And it was myself and another woman. She was our aux officer. Her name was Rachel. And she was on the other team as well. And it went, we did 5 months over there, pulled over a lot of ships, inspected a lot, not an incident.
Not a problem.
Happened. No problems. I mean, it was so unremarkable. I mean, nothing happened. The worst that happened is that, sometimes we got sick because they were such small little dingy ships, and you'd be there and you would just get seasick on them. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, but it was stuff like that, that made it worthwhile to kind of fight through and make it more normal. Like anybody can do this if you train them. Anybody's capable.
Yeah. And you just need the opportunity.
You just need the opportunity.
So, I mean, to his credit, it sounds
he gave it to me.
And he fixed himself. He's allowed to be wrong and then go back and reverse himself. So credit to him. You keep in touch with that captain at all, or you find him on?
We do, because my husband, one of the reasons we didn't get along is my husband's an amazing golfer, and that's not why we don't get along. But we would pull into like Yorktown to load for ammo or fuel or whatever before we'd get underway. And he would not be part of the crews that stayed on the ship to do that. My husband would go golfing with Captain Kennedy.
Really?
Yes. They were both avid golfers, right? So, but because of that, we do keep in touch.
Okay.
He lives down in Virginia Beach, and of course he's retired. But we're very close to him. He was a mentor to my husband too.
What is the rank of a commanding officer of a destroyer?
Captain, 06.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, that's not even the rank of a commanding officer for a submarine. They're 05s, So that's, I'm trying to say it because I'm like, that's a pretty significant ship to be in charge of, especially if I thought a navigator would be a department head, but it's still really big responsibility. And I wonder when you were in the Med, what year do you remember? Because like if you graduated in 96,
95. 95 I graduated.
95. I was in the Med in 97, and I was one of those submarines that was escorting ships around sometimes. We were also
Were you up in the Adriatic? Because that's where I was.
Not 97. I would have been mainly in the med.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but we were always doing missions with the surface. We call them the surface pukes. But I'm joking.
I know. No, I know. We were called that. We were also called transportation by the Marines.
Yes.
Yeah. They just referred to us as transportation. Taxi.
We loved playing war games with other Navy ships because we came from the submarine capital of the world. There wasn't a lot of other ships you saw out there, right? So we would, submarines aren't designed to, kind of run with the herd. I mean, every battle group has a next amount of submarines that are kind of, people don't realize when you see a carrier, there's probably a submarine doing donuts underneath it, Yeah. I mean, we protect the fleet.
We could never find you guys. We would do ops on the way across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
And it was always like, find the submarine. And we could never pick you guys up.
Hell yeah.
And then you would just pop up. And
wink with our periscopes.
Yeah. And you would just be, less than a mile off our...
There were times where I had, so I was lucky. My first captain was Claude Barron, who was a Navy Academy grad, amazing guy from Texas. And he left as an admiral and stuff. He was pretty high up in the food chain. Not that he wasn't a great officer, but he was more, he was getting the ship out of the shipyards. It had ran aground, and he was a captain that was really designed to get a ship out of a shipyard that had been there for a few years and get it back to sea and through sea trials. Mm-hmm. Mark Breer was the commanding officer of commanding officer school, and he became our next captain. And he, ironically enough, is a Citadel grad, which is a big factor in when I was talking to my son about going to the Citadel, because I had the opportunity to work under a Navy Academy and a Citadel grad. And they're both fine. They're both great leaders for obvious reasons. But I'm like, I got to tell you, like the Citadel officer that I had, I feel like he had more confidence in some of the things that he was trying to teach us. And that radiates into the crew. Like you're a captain, because you're a captain. That's the first time you're the captain. Those, you don't get to like 2-3 captain tours and then you're going to get good at this.
Yeah.
So like, hey, this guy's in his chair for the first time. I really hope that they pick the right one, And this person was great, and he had a profound impact. I mean, both of those commanding officers had a huge impact on me, but he was awesome because he was also pretty cavalier. So he would, we would try to see if we get close enough to some of those surface ships to like launch flares on their deck or something like that, without them catching us or something. Yeah. We would have P3s chasing us through the med, and then we would broach the ship enough to where the fair water planes would be out of the water, and we'd wave them to them, and then we'd go back down and stuff.
Yeah.
But the goal was we would always be at war games with the surface fleet or the anti-submarine community, the P3s and stuff that were dropping sonar buoys on us. But we rarely would get counter-detected. Even the German U-boats, when we would do ops or training operations with the German U-boats, those are diesel boats, and we're running with high reactor coolant frequency pumps, right? And we were able to counter-detect them twice as far out as they could ever find us. And we were running with reactor coolant pumps. And they were running on they were running on batteries when they were submerged. Yeah. You would think that would be a lot quieter, but I don't know. It probably came down to training. Our crews are training. You're training 18 hours a day on a ship, it seems like, you're always in a training routine, even on watch or off going, so, and that's the only thing that made us safe. But I was asking when you were in the med, because I was there in 97, but I was also like, I'd pull into Sardinia and go to La Maddalena, and we'd pick up all whatever we were doing and then go do our little missions around the med. What a great place.
It is, yeah.
I think I hit 18 countries when I was in the military.
Yeah.
Like who else maybe it was like 15. I could rattle them all.
But still, just the experience, right?
Who gets to say they get to do all those things? Like, that's why, like, when I talk to my kids, and going back to the story that we were saying, I know that a lot of kids feel like, hey, if I just go to college, it's the best place to park myself. And because I'm moving forward with something, I'm accomplishing something, and it's going to give me time to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And I'm like, the military offers the same thing, except the difference is they pay you for it. Going to debt doing it, right? And you have a skill set or a craft, like a tradesman, that you learn. Like, you came out and you had an NEC, a Naval Enlisted Career, like an Army MOS or military operational specialty. You had a career, you had a craft. You came out and you had a skill set that. Today, I run, what we do for a living, but one of the business units is recruiting veterans. I could read and interpret the resume of a person with your background or mine and understand exactly how easy they could acclimate or transition into a role which they have no experience doing, but they've been taught how to learn at an accelerated rate, and their emotional range allows them to not give up in the middle of the pressure of learning something that's critical. The date-related motivation that they're under seems to not really have a negative impact on them as much as it would others that haven't been through that conditioning or training. Have you seen that?
I have. Oh, for sure. I have. And I think there's another element there that you can pick up on with veterans. It's there's they bring their whole selves to it every single day, but that's because you can see that there is a higher purpose driving them. They're part of something bigger than them, and they know it, right? And they realize it, and it becomes very important to them and who they are, right? And that's gold right there. When you have somebody who's bringing their whole self, and they're going to give everything they have because they believe in the higher vision, the higher goal, where we're headed with things. It's amazing.
You know what's even more amazing, because I couldn't agree with you more, but it is working with people. Like we talked about diversity and culture and stuff. And I'm like, what I found in the military was there's lots of people I didn't like, on my ship. I mean, I had a crew of 112 people, and I knew the first, last, middle names of every one of them. Yeah. I knew the names of all their kids after a deployment. Like we knew each other. I'm not saying we didn't ever punch each other in the face on a deployment, but those were still my brothers, right? So like if we went to a bar and we just got in a fight, like if someone bumped them, that was my brother still, right? But we moderated ourselves and we policed ourselves pretty well, but we grew very strong in these relationships with each other. The one thing that I would say is we were pulling each other up the whole way. I felt like I had an island of misfit toys that like one day I'd be on a run and I'd have a good thing and I was doing something great, and then one day I'd be out of wind, but when I was doing great, I was pulling the team with me, or I was trying to make a whole, and we were all rotating through that. I feel like a lot of people that join the military, like those are people that there's a lot of people. How many people do you ever run into, Tammy? They're like, man, if I go back, I would have joined. I wish I had.
Oh, all the time, the time.
But how many people do you run in that have joined the military that have said, I wish I didn't?
No, that doesn't happen.
None of it does, because it's a great place to be from. It could be a very difficult place to be.
Yeah.
But you have to go in there with the right mindset, and you have to go in there knowing like what you talked about and what you were just talking about was the most significant part. And that is, I think the people that join the military represent the one thing that they all have in common is they're willing to go take the risk of signing a contract for years of their life.
Yeah.
To be a part of something that's greater and more significant than themselves.
Yeah.
And that is why they joined. And I think that if we can help provide them that same thing upon their exit, then they will transition into a role where like, they didn't join the military. Did you join the military to make money?
No.
Okay.
No.
I didn't either. But we did it to learn, and we felt like we were going to grab a skill set that would allow us to make a difference. So I think most of these people that join the military, they do it because they're generally pushing the boundaries of life and not living within the limit of a construct that makes them comfortable. But they're like, I have no idea, but I'm going to go take this risk.
Yeah.
And those people approach problems differently. Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
And I think the reason why I loved the military is because I have yet to find anything that inspires me more than those that are willing to take the risk that could cost them up to and including their life on this oath to go be a part of something that's more important than themselves, right? I mean, like in many respects, if you lay it out like that, it almost sounds like the military is a cult, but it's not. I mean, it's just an opportunity to be a part of something significant. Think about it. A battleship or a destroyer that you were $1 billion? How much did it destroy?
Oh, yeah. At least, right?
Billions of dollars for a submarine, right?
Yeah.
Know any other people your age that were driving multi-billion-dollar war machines?
In their 20s?
Yes.
Yeah. The average age on a destroyer is 21.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It is awesome. Awesomely crazy. And I tell my kids this, I'm like, hey, college is a great place. It's not going anywhere. You could go to college when you're 50 if you wanted to. I've seen plenty of people do it. I'm like,
you can go to college while you're in the Navy or in the military.
I did. I clept when I got out of the military, I only had a couple of years of college left because I clept most of the time, or I was going to Navy campus and taking classes.
That's right. I did the same thing.
It's why wouldn't you? I mean, say I get done with all your needs module. Oh, well, let's figure out what I have to do to promote. And then when you get done with those things, you're like, why wouldn't I just keep doing it? They're offering me these resources at basically no cost. I'd be an idiot not to take advantage of it. But I say those things because I feel that that's the stuff that we have in common. And we both share something, you and I, which is a love for where we came from and a desire to contribute and give back.
That's right.
Right? We've got to the top of the hill, and it's our job to reach back behind and start continuing to find ways to pull others through, because if not us, then who is going to do that?
Yeah.